It began as a simple summer expedition, a small group of young hikers led by an instructor whose name carried weight in every mountaineering circle of Siberia. The Khamar Daban range was not considered treacherous. The peaks were mild compared to the greater mountains to the north. But the locals spoke of its sudden storms, its whispers at night, its air that seemed to listen. No one took such stories seriously until the summer of 1993, when 7 hikers vanished into its mist, and only one came back. The group was led by Lyudmila Korovina, a veteran instructor from Moscow. She was known for her discipline and composure, a mentor who demanded precision but cared deeply for her students. Under her guidance were 6 young hikers, strong, trained, and full of life. They carried the right gear, the right mindset, and the confidence that comes from years of preparation. There was no reason to doubt the success of this journey. Their route began on August 2nd, 1993. The plan was simple: cross the Khamar Daban Ridge, descend toward Lake Baikal, and reach the village of Murino within a week. The weather was warm, the skies were clear, and the first few days went as expected. Photographs taken along the way show laughter, open landscapes, and a group that looked perfectly at ease. Every image now feels like a frozen fragment of calm before the storm. By August 5th, the weather began to shift. In the mountains, change comes quickly. Clouds gather like smoke, and the wind carries warnings before anyone can interpret them. Rain arrived in sheets, temperatures plummeted, and visibility collapsed. The group pressed on, determined to reach higher ground before nightfall. They set camp near the headwaters of the Langutai River, surrounded by rolling slopes and fog so thick it swallowed the horizon. At some point that evening, something went wrong. What happened in the following hours remains one of the most disturbing mysteries in modern Russian history. According to the only survivor, Valentina Utochenko, everything disintegrated with impossible speed. The first to fall was one of the men, healthy, strong, and suddenly overcome by an invisible force. He clutched his chest, gasped for air, and collapsed. Then another fell. Within moments, the group was thrown into chaos. Their bodies shook violently. Some tore off their clothes, clawed at their throats, stumbled through the rain, screaming without words. Others simply dropped where they stood, their faces twisted between pain and peace. By the time the storm passed, 6 were dead. Valentina fled, wandering through the wilderness for days before collapsing near another expedition's camp. When she was rescued, she was in shock, dehydrated, disoriented, half-conscious. Her testimony would later form the core of what little anyone knows about that night. But even her memories were fragmentary, more like flashes of a nightmare than a coherent story. Rescue teams arrived days later. What they found defied all logic. The camp was in disarray, but not destroyed. Backpacks and food supplies were untouched. Cooking gear remained arranged neatly on the ground, as if dinner had been interrupted by something that didn't leave marks. The bodies lay within a small radius of one another, scattered across the slope in lifeless silence. No signs of struggle, no injuries, no footprints other than their own. The weather had stripped the world of sound. Only the wind moved. The bodies looked oddly peaceful. Their faces were calm, some even smiling. That detail disturbed even the most seasoned rescuers. It was unnatural, as though death had come softly, leaving behind not horror, but acceptance. The investigation that followed raised more questions than it answered. The autopsies found no external injuries, no evidence of poisoning, no signs of violent trauma. The heart, Lungs and organs of each victim were normal. The official explanation leaned toward hypothermia under extreme stress. But that diagnosis failed to account for the sequence of events. How could 6 people, all trained and healthy, die within minutes of each other, while one, in the same conditions, survived? The answer, it seemed, was hidden somewhere beyond science. Speculation spread quickly. Some said the group had eaten something toxic, wild plants or spoiled food. Others whispered about military experiments, nerve agents, or radiation. But no toxins were found, no burns detected, no damage that could explain the sudden collapse. There was only that terrible image. 6 bodies lying on a mountainside, frozen mid-motion, their faces marked by strange, peaceful smiles. Even decades later, the Khamar Daban case remains a riddle that refuses to fade. Every year, researchers revisit it, drawing parallels to the Dyatlov Pass, another mystery born in the frozen heart of Russia, another group that fled from safety for reasons unknown. But there's something uniquely haunting about Khamar Daban. It isn't the violence or the horror, it's the serenity. Whatever killed them did not leave behind terror. It left stillness. And for those who stood among their bodies, surrounded by silence and fog, one thought lingered above all others. They didn't die screaming. They died smiling. When investigators climbed to the site weeks later, the mountain was silent again. Only fragments of the tragedy remained. Torn tents, damp clothing, scattered belongings. But every object seemed to hold a question. Food was untouched. Maps were folded neatly in a waterproof bag. A radio receiver sat near the center of the camp, fully functional, yet never used to call for help. Even the cooking gear was still arranged for breakfast, as if someone had stopped mid-motion and never returned. The first autopsy reports deepened the confusion. None of the victims bore external wounds. There were no signs of frostbite severe enough to explain death, and no internal damage beyond what might be expected from collapse and exposure. Their lungs and hearts showed no pattern of suffocation, no evidence of poisoning. Their eyes were calm, their hands uncurled. It was as if they had simply fallen asleep in terror and never awoke. Forensic specialists considered the possibility of hypothermia-induced delirium, a phenomenon known to drive victims to undress and wander. But the temperatures, though freezing, were not low enough to kill 6 people within such a short period. Moreover, their final positions, close together, unpanicked, contradicted every known stage of hypothermic death. Whatever struck them, it did so quickly, without confusion or struggle. Attention soon turned to the survivor, Valentina. Her story was fragmented, her memory broken by trauma. She remembered the screams, the convulsions, the rain turning red around their faces. She recalled seeing Lyudmila, the leader, still trying to give orders as she herself began to shake uncontrollably. Then, nothing. A gap. Silence. When she regained awareness, everyone else was dead. She wandered downhill, guided only by the distant sound of water. Her survival raised as many questions as it answered. Why her? She had eaten the same food, drunk the same water, endured the same storm. Some suggested she had been farther from the group when the attack began. Others thought she may have been spared by random chance. Yet her account of the final moments remained consistent. No noise from above, no explosion, no flash of light. Just pain, panic, and death. For years, the official report offered only one conclusion: death from hypothermia and stress under extreme environmental conditions. But no one truly believed it. Scientists revisited the case, searching for natural explanations. One theory proposed contaminated food, perhaps toxic mushrooms or local plants mistaken for edible ones. But toxicology tests found nothing. Another proposed a lightning strike or electrical discharge. Yet there were no burns, no tree damage, no metallic residue. Then came the theory of infrasound. Low-frequency vibrations capable of inducing nausea, panic, or disorientation. Some believed the storm that night had produced these frequencies, causing confusion and flight. Yet this could not explain the physical collapse, the bleeding, the foam, or the serene expressions. It was as if the mind had been overwhelmed by something beyond comprehension. Over time, darker theories emerged. The mountains near Khamar Daban were known for secret military activity during the Cold War. Locals spoke quietly about testing sites hidden within the ridges, of strange lights and humming noises echoing through the valleys at night. Some believed the hikers had stumbled upon an experiment they were never meant to witness. Perhaps a weapon designed to incapacitate without leaving traces. But no records confirmed such tests, and the authorities denied everything. By the late 1990s, the story had faded from newspapers, replaced by the next generation of mysteries. But for those who had seen the photographs, the memory lingered. The peaceful faces, the symmetry of death, the absence of violence, all of it felt wrong. Too calm, too deliberate. Decades later, hikers still avoid that part of the Khamar Daban Ridge. Locals claim that radios malfunction near the site. Some say that when fog descends, you can hear faint laughter carried by the wind, soft, distant, and unmistakably human. Valentina never returned to the mountains. She lived quietly, rarely speaking of what happened. When she did, her words were measured, almost detached. The tone of someone who no longer sought answers. Whatever she had seen up there, she carried it alone. Today, the Khamar Daban Incident stands beside the Dyatlov Pass as one of Russia's most haunting unsolved tragedies. Both stories share the same cruel symmetry. Groups of experienced hikers, overtaken by something unseen, their final actions defying reason. But where Dyatlov's victims died fleeing in terror, the Khamar Daban hikers met death with an eerie calm. Perhaps that is what makes it so unsettling. Terror, at least, can be understood. But peace in the face of death, that is harder to explain. The mountain keeps its secrets, the forest reclaims its evidence, and the wind carries only echoes. And for those who still study the case, one thought remains. Whatever came for them that night was not of the ordinary world. They didn't die fighting. They didn't die afraid. They died smiling,